A wet market is a marketplace selling fresh meat, fish, produce, and other consumption-oriented perishable goods in a non-supermarket setting, as distinguished from dry markets that sell durable goods such as fabric and electronics. These include a wide variety of markets, such as farmers' markets, fish markets, and wildlife markets. Not all wet markets sell live animals, but the term wet market is sometimes used to signify a live animal market in which vendors slaughter animals upon customer purchase, such as is done with poultry in Hong Kong. Wet markets are common in many parts of the world, notably in China, Southeast Asia, and South Asia. They often play critical roles in urban food security due to factors of pricing, freshness of food, social interaction, and local cultures. Most wet markets do not trade in wild or exotic animals, but those that do have been linked to outbreaks of zoonotic diseases including COVID-19, H5N1 avian flu, severe acute respiratory syndrome, and monkeypox. Several countries have banned wet markets from holding wildlife. Media reports that fail to distinguish between all wet markets and those with live animals or wildlife, as well as insinuations of fostering wildlife smuggling, have been blamed for fueling xenophobia related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The term wet market came into common use in Singapore in the early 1970s when the government used it to distinguish such traditional markets from the supermarkets that had become popular there. The term was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2016 as a term used throughout Southeast Asia. The OED's earliest cited use of the term is from the Straits Times of Singapore in 1978. The wet market refers to the constantly wet floors due to the melting of ice used to keep food from spoiling, the washing of meat and seafood stalls in the spraying of fresh produce that are common in wet markets. The term public market may be synonymous with wet market, although it may sometimes refer exclusively to state-owned and community-owned wet markets. Wet markets may also be called fresh food markets and good food markets when referring to markets consisting of numerous competing vendors primarily selling fresh produce like fruits and vegetables. The term wet market is frequently used to signify a live animal market that sells directly to consumers, although the terms are not synonymous. Although the term wet market may refer to markets that sell wild animals and wildlife products, it is not synonymous with the term wildlife market, which exclusively refers to markets that contain wildlife products. The term wet market, which specifies markets that sell fresh produce and meat, includes a broad variety of markets. Wet markets can be categorized according to their ownership structure. They can be further subcategorized based on whether the meat inventory originates from domesticated or wild animals. Traditional wet markets are typically housed in temporary sheds, open-air sites, or partially open commercial complexes, while modern wet markets are housed in buildings often equipped with improved ventilation, freezing, and refrigeration facilities. Wet markets are less dependent on imported goods than supermarkets due to their smaller volumes and lesser emphasis on consistency. Wet markets have been described in a 2019 food security study as critical for ensuring urban food security, particularly in Chinese cities. The roles of wet markets in supporting urban food security include food pricing and physical accessibility. Academic papers in urban studies, studies on food distribution, and the Singapore National Environment Agency have noted lower prices, greater freshness of food, and the facilitation of both bargaining and social interaction as key reasons for the persistence of wet markets. The persistence of wet markets has also been attributed to culinary traditions that call for freshly slaughtered meat and fish as opposed to frozen meats. In developing countries with agriculture-based economies, fresh meat is mainly distributed through traditional wet markets or meat stalls. Wet markets selling fresh meat are often attached to or located near slaughter facilities. If sanitation standards are not maintained, wet markets can spread disease. Those that carry live animals and wildlife are at especially high risk of transmitting zoonoses. Because of the openness, Newly introduced animals may come in direct contact with sales clerks, butchers, and customers, or to other animals which they would never interact with in the wild. This may allow for some animals to act as intermediate hosts, helping a disease spread to humans. Outbreaks of zoonotic diseases including COVID-19, H5N1 avian flu, severe acute respiratory syndrome, and monkeypox have been traced to live wildlife markets where the potential for zoonotic transmission is greatly increased. Wildlife markets in China have been implicated in the 2002 Saudi riots.